Hello, welcome back to Introduction to Blender for Maya Users, Part 5. Materials. In Part 4 we went over how to create 3D primitives, and then some basic modeling techniques. In Part 5, we will go over the basics of creating materials in Blender for your 3D objects, and how they may relate to what you already know from Maya or another 3D program. For this tutorial, we will look at creating basic materials, adding textures to those materials, and then get into some basic environmental lighting and touch a bit on the built-in rendering engines available. Let's get started. I have a new scene here with the default cube, a camera, and a light. First, let's select and delete the default cube so everything we create is new. I'm going to add some primitives to the scene so we have a variety of objects to apply some materials to. I'm typing Shift-A to bring up the Add menu, and then I'm going to add a mesh, then plane to the scene. This will be our floor or tabletop. Hit the N key to bring up the side menu, and make sure the Item tab is highlighted. Then let's scale the plane up to 6 times by left-click dragging down on all these scale values, and then typing 6 like so. Shift-A again, and this time I'm going to select Cube. Then move the cube up and over to the right a bit to make some room at the origin. Then I'll press Shift-A again and Mesh, and this time I'll create a UV sphere. I'll just raise this up a bit, and move the sphere over to the left. And one more, I'll hit Shift-A, then Mesh, and I'll select the cone. And bring that up a bit, so it's sitting on the plane. I'll press N to hide the side panel. And then zoom in a bit. Quick transform tip, I want these objects to be sitting on the plane. If I take a look at where they are, I can see that some are above, and some are below because I just arbitrarily placed them. With the cone selected, go up to the middle section of the 3D viewport, and click on the magnet icon. Then in the drop-down next to it, select Face. Select the cone, and move it up and down a bit until it snaps to the plane face. Now let's do the same with the sphere. Left-click, drag up and down until you see it snap to the surface. And finally the cube. Like this. Now if we take a look, all the shapes are now sitting perfectly on the plane. Great! You can turn off the snapping tool now. If you enjoy this video, please tap the like button and subscribe to our channel to get notified when new videos are posted. First, a quick note about lights and renders, and how they affect materials. We are currently in the solid shading mode here in the 3D viewport, as we can tell by the highlighted icon in the upper right of our viewport. Everything is a basic gray, and there is no lighting per se. To properly view the results of materials editing, we will need at least one light in our scene to see what we're doing. The good news is we have a light in our scene already. It came with the default general scene when we started Blender. Since we are in the solid shading mode, we don't see any effect from the light. For this, we will want to go into the rendered shading mode, which is the last icon in the row here. Click on it, and we immediately see the effect from the light onto the objects, and even a nice shadow. If your scene looks different or you want to adjust the light a bit, click on it in the viewport, and then use the standard move tool to position it where you want. The lighting updates in real time. This looks good for me. Over in the Properties editor, click on the little camera-looking icon at the toolbar to reveal the render settings. Note the very first drop-down is the render engine. This is what is controlling what we are seeing in our viewport when we have rendered shading mode selected. Currently Blender defaults at the EVE render engine, which is a decent real-time render engine you would find in game engines. Click this drop-down to open it up. The Workbench engine is optimized for fast rendering, much like being in the solid shading mode. This is intended primarily for quick testing of animations or modeling without being bogged down by textures, reflections, etc. Click on the Cycles render engine. You may have noticed the scene changed just a bit in quality. You can toggle back and forth between EVE and Cycles to see the difference with this current setup. Cycles is a path tracing renderer like ray tracing that uses a physically based renderer designed for very realistic results. When I work with materials or textures and lighting in a scene, I almost always use Cycles as I work, so I can see a very accurate representation of what I will see when I render out a higher quality image or animation. Think of this mode in the viewport as an IPR render in Maya, updating in near real time as you edit materials, or lighting, or move around the scene like this. The quality settings, which affect the redraw time, are below in the sampling drop-down. We have the viewport, which is what you are seeing right now. And we have the render, which is what the final render will produce. We will render our scene at the end to give you an idea of what we are seeing in real time here, versus the final render. For now, I'm going to leave the viewport settings at the default. Okay. Back to Materials. Left-click on the plane in the scene to select it. In the Properties editor, click on the bottom reddish icon to bring up the materials properties for this object. At the moment, this mesh has no materials assigned to it. We know this because there is nothing in this field here. In Maya, you would see a default Lambert probably assigned to anything you create. In Blender, there is a default material, but it needs to be applied to any new primitives that you add into the scene. If you click on this little materials icon drop down here, you will see the list of materials available in the scene. And here is our default material. With the plane selected, go ahead and click on material in the list. Okay, now not much changed in the viewport, but something has changed in the properties panel for sure. In our window, we now have a material, which is what we just assigned to the plane. Below that we have a preview pane, so we can preview our material on different meshes. And then we have some very basic PBR or physically based render settings. And then a whole host of quick access settings as well. For now, I'm going to rename this material by double-clicking it, and then typing default_material, just so I know what this is in the future. Next to surface, it says Principled BSDF. This is the core shader material in Blender, and what almost all of your materials will use. Clicking on it will bring up a long list of other types of shaders that you could change this to. You may recognize some of them from Maya. We will explore a couple of these later in this video. For now, I'm leaving the default material as Principled BSDF. Click on the white color swatch next to base color. Pick a color. I'll pick a pink/rose color. And the plane changes color. If you wanted to use a texture or image or pattern instead of a flat color, you could click on the yellow dot next to base color, and that brings up a ton of options to choose from. I'm going to leave this as is for now, and I will show you a more detailed node-based materials editor in just a bit, which will have you feeling right at home if coming from a Hypershade or other node-based PBR material editor such as Unreal Engine. For now, I'll just quickly pop through these default settings. Let's slide the metallic slider to 1. And that gives our plane a metal look. We can adjust the roughness/shininess and make it a very shiny plane or a much rougher one, and so on. Going back up to the top here, I'll pull this editor window out a bit. Next to the drop-down is the name of the material that we are currently viewing the properties of. This can change depending on if your mesh has multiple materials applied to different faces. We'll get into this a little later in the video. Move all the way over to the X. This is an unlinked data button, not a delete button. What this does, and I'll click it, is remove the material from the mesh it was assigned to. But if we click on the drop-down, we see the material is still there, just no longer assigned to our plane. We can reassign it if we want. Or click the New button to create a new one. Let's do that. Click on New. Let's double-click on the name and name it plane_material, and I'll just make that a light shade of yellow so it stands out just a bit. Going back to the drop-down, you can now see we have two materials in the scene to choose from: the default and the new plane material. Okay, as promised, let's check out the node-based materials editor. Across the top of your window, look for the word shading and click on it. This brings up the shading editor. If this is the first time using the editor, yours should look similar to mine. We have a main 3D viewport, below that, a nice node-based workspace, and then some ancillary windows to the left which apparently don't get used very much, at least not in my experience. If you don't see anything in the lower shader editor, make sure the plane is selected, place your mouse within the shader editor area, and then press the home key to frame the material node within the window. I'm going to slide up this editor edge a bit to give us some more room. Use the middle mouse button to click drag to move around in this window, or scroll to zoom in and out. If you ever get lost, or something goes off the screen, click the home key to reframe everything. To frame a selected node, you can click the number pad period, or hit the tilde key, then select frame selected. Alright, This is more like it. If your Properties menu is still on the Materials Properties, you will see that this is an identical panel to what you are seeing in the shader editor in the middle here. As I change the color here, it changes in the Properties editor as well. The top portion of the screen has defaulted back to Material Preview, the second to last icon at the top. But I want to use the rendered view, so I'll click on that here. So if you are coming from Maya or Max or maybe another 3D software, and you are thinking materials or shaders, you are picturing a pop-up window or panel filled with sphere icons representing different materials in the scene. At the moment, Blender's materials are created and displayed a bit differently. I say at the moment because the folks behind Blender are always adding new functionality to the software, not to mention the many add-on or plugins that are being developed every day. For now, you have this workflow which we will explore together. In the shader editor top, you will see a similar drop-down. Here we can assign the material to our mesh like before. The slot 1 drop-down indicates what materials we have assigned to the mesh. If we had more than one, they would be listed here. Again, we'll check that out a bit later in the video. In the upper left corner of the editor is the editor type drop-down we learned about in part 1 of this series. Next to that, we have the type of data to display the shader for. If I click on this and select World, you will get the World shader, which we will explore in a bit as well. For now, click on the color swatch in the background node like this. Slide the value slider up and down, and notice the background color changes. This is like changing the environment color background of your camera in the Attributes editor in Maya. Let's switch this back to object mode. Click on the Add menu within the shader editor. This is a drop-down of all the different nodes you can add to the scene, the Shift-A of the shader editor if you will. Here you can add textures, patterns, and functions like ramps, as well as hue, saturation, and brightness controls. I'd like to add some textures to my material to give my plane a nice marble look, as if it's a countertop. If you are a veteran 3D user, you know where to find textures for materials. But you might not know about some great sites out there where you can download some free material textures. One such place is Polygon.com with 2 letter I's. Here you can find thousands of materials, assets, and HDRIs for your projects, and many of them are free. Let's go check out the free section. I'm looking for a decent countertop material. This guy looks decent. I can choose the resolution I want. I'll leave it at 2K, and then download the zip file which contains all the associated textures. Once downloaded and unzipped, I now have a folder with some textures that I can apply to my plane material. I'll copy the location of these and then go back into Blender. In the shader editor, place your mouse within the window and press Shift-A to bring up the Add menu. Go to Texture and then Image Texture. Place this node next to the main BSDF node as shown. You can create a new texture within Blender or open an existing one. I want to open an existing one. Let's click Open here. Hovering over the individual files gives you a quick preview of what the texture looks like. I'll select the one that says Base Color for my plane. Once loaded, let's connect the 2 yellow color nodes together. And there you have it. The color of the nodes is a big hint as to what nodes can connect to other nodes. Here, yellow to yellow was pretty easy. I know my countertop isn't metal, so I'll leave that alone. But I did see a roughness map in the folder, so I'll once again press Shift-A and bring in another image texture. Click Open and navigate to my Textures folder. Then select the roughness image. Here you will connect a yellow to a white node, but this gives you a bit of a hint that something isn't perfect. A roughness map is a black and white image. It shouldn't contain color. We will want to tell Blender this by changing the color space of the imported image. Click on the color space drop down here and change it from sRGB to non-color. You could leave it as sRGB, which would still look fine, but just wouldn't be as physically accurate. Alright, I want to add one last texture to my plane, and that is the normal texture to give it some bump. I'll zoom out a bit and make some room for my texture. I can also collapse these other nodes at the top. Shift-A and once again Texture, Texture Image. If you ever create a node and it doesn't show up, chances are it's off the screen. Just press the Home key on your keyboard to center all the nodes. Let's click on Open, then go find our normal map. Here we are. I'll connect the color from the normal to the purple normal map input on the shader like so. But as before, something isn't perfect. We want to tell Blender to use this particular image as a normal map, and not as a color map. First, let's change this from an sRGB color space to a non-color space. Next, move the texture node over a bit, and then again press Shift-A. We want to find a normal map node. You can quickly search for this in the search field. Type normal map and it comes up. Select it, and it will add a normal map node into the window. Notice the yellow color input and the purple normal output. This is exactly what we want. Click drag the normal map node over top of the noodle, which is connecting the texture to the shader. It turns white. Release it. It connects the proper node inputs and outputs for you. I'm going to go ahead and save this file now. If you haven't already, go ahead and go to File, then Save As, and save the file on your system. Okay, back in the scene. Let's go ahead and smooth these meshes a bit. I'll select the sphere. Right-click and select Shade Auto Smooth. Then the cone, and do the same. That's better. Let's select the UV sphere. The shader editor goes blank, as there is no existing material for this mesh. Let's click on New at the top here. It automatically creates a Principled BSDF shader. Change the color to nice deep red. Like that. Then let's decrease the roughness to get a good shine on it. Great. For the cone, I want to make this glass. Click to select the cone, then in the shading editor, click New. This defaults to a Principled shader. Over in the Material Properties, under Surface, change this from Principled to Glass BSDF. You may have to scroll up to find this. Notice the node in the shader editor changed. I'll bring down the roughness a bit to make my glass cone a bit more shiny. Okay, that looks good. I'll double-click on the name and rename it glass_material. Next, let's go back to our Polygon.com site and grab a free wood texture. This will do nicely. I'll download and unzip it. Back inside Blender. Click on the cube and select New for a new material. Middle mouse drag to reposition the nodes a bit. Alright, I'll go through the same steps as before with the plane. Shift-A, and then select Texture, then Image Texture. If I connect this up before I add the texture, I get a purple cube. If you ever see something as purple including the environment, it means that something is missing, or that Blender can't find the texture it's looking for. In this case, there is no texture, so it's warning us that something isn't right. It'll go to Open, and find my wood texture, and click on Base Color. And open that up. Alright, I'll do this again for the roughness and the normal map as well. Connect to the roughness node, and change the color space to non-color. And the normal. Change that to non-color. And then find a normal map node to pump this through. And connect like so. Alright. I have a wooden cube. But I'm not a big fan of the wood grain going side to side. I'd rather have it going up and down. To adjust this within the shader editor, I'll need a couple of new nodes. Shift-A, then search for Texture Coordinate node. And add that into the editor. Next, we'll add a mapping node. Like so. Connect the UV output to the vector input. The vector output of the mapping node to the vector input on your base color node like this. Alright, now we have some control over how the UVs are being used by using the mapping node to change them before they hit the shader. Under rotation, change the Y value to 90 degrees. Alright, that rotated my base color texture as expected. Zoom out a bit, and then connect the output of my mapping vector to the input vectors on both my roughness map and my normal map. Great! If you wanted to change the scale or location of the texture or tile it, you could adjust the location or scale units accordingly. Let's rename this material. You can do this in the shader editor by selecting the name here, or like we did before in the materials property editor. Looking at my cube, I think I want to have the top face be a flat color, maybe like it's painted. In order to create a new material only for the top face, I'll first have to select the face. I need to go into edit mode for this. So in the upper window here, I'll just hit the tab key to toggle into edit mode. And then type the number 3 to get face select. And then click on the top of my cube. Over in the materials properties window, where it says the name of the material, I want to click the plus button here. That added a new slot to my material. At the moment the slot is empty, so we need to fill it with a new material. I'll click New. And a new material is now in slot number 2 position. Double-click the new material and rename it to cube_top. Nothing changed on the cube. That's because even though we created a new slot and material, we haven't told Blender to assign that new material to the face. We can do that now, with the face still selected and the cube_top material highlighted. Click on Assign. There we go. Now let's change this white color to something a little more fun, like a bright blue. Click off to the side to see the cube top without it being highlighted. Great. With the cursor in the top window, press Tab key again to toggle back into object mode. I think my background is a little bland, and I would like to add some more lighting into the scene. I can do this by adding an environment HDRI to the scene. First, let's go grab an HDRI image from polyhaven.com. A great place for free HDRI downloads. I'll grab this one here and download the 4K version. To add an HDRI to the scene, while we are in the shader editor, click on the object drop-down menu in the editor, and then select World. This brings up the background node. If you don't see this, hit the Home key to recenter all the nodes to the view. Alright, press Shift then A, and we want a texture, and then we want an environment texture node. If we connect the color output to the color input before loading the image, we get the purple sky of doom. So let's click Open and find our HDRI. Ah, that's better. It seems that the lighting from the HDRI is coming from a direction that I'm not a big fan of. I'd like it to be coming more from the right side of the view. We can change this the same way we adjusted the wood, by adding a few nodes. But this time, I'm going to show you a quick shortcut to get to where we want, and it involves an add-on, which is what Blender calls plugins. The good news is, this add-on is already built into Blender, we just have to turn it on. Go up to the Edit menu, and then Preferences. Click on Add-ons on the left. Look for an add-on called Node Wrangler. Check the box to turn it on. And that's it. You can close the Preferences panel. Back in the shader editor, click on the Environment Texture node. Now press Ctrl T. This automatically creates the texture coordinate and mapping nodes and hooks them up for you. Pretty sweet. Alright, now I can adjust the Z-rotation in the mapping node to move the sky around a bit. Something more like that. Perfect. Let's go back to the Layout tab at the top. If it resets back to another view mode, just go ahead and click back on the rendered shading icon. Before we set off a render, we have to realize that Blender is going to use the camera to render from, not the viewport view as we see here. The camera is off to our left a bit. To see what the camera sees, and what your render will see, we can click on the little camera icon on the right of our viewport here. When we do, we notice that we are a little too far in, and my objects are being cropped. I don't want that. So, I need to move the camera. The easiest way, and probably what you are used to doing in Maya, is to orbit, pan and zoom while you are in this view. If I try this, it pops me back into the viewport view, and I am no longer looking through the camera. Click the camera icon again to go back to viewing from the camera POV. Once you are in this mode, notice the little icon below the camera icon has changed from an orthographic icon to a lock. Click on the lock. Now, when we orbit, pan or zoom, we are locked to the camera view, allowing us to frame our scene using familiar tools. This looks good to me. I can now uncheck the lock and return to my scene. In the Properties editor, click on the little camera icon to bring up the render settings. We are using the Cycles render engine, and under Render, we are using the default settings for quality. Click on the output icon below the render icon here to bring up the output settings. This is similar to the common tab in the Maya Render settings pop-up. My resolution is HD, which is fine. I'll leave all these settings to the default. The moment has come. Click the render menu at the top left of the screen and click on Render Image, or hit F12 for the shortcut. This will immediately bring up a huge render window and begin rendering your image. You can see the progress it's making by watching the sample numbers go up. We had selected 4,096 samples, and this is showing the progress here of how far we have to go. While this is rendering, you can minimize this window or just make it smaller, and then zoom out a bit with your mouse wheel. If you want to cancel a render in progress, just hit the escape key. I'll fast forward here to the final render. I'd say that was a good introduction to get you started. I hope you got something out of this video. If so, please like and subscribe. Also, please leave a note in the comments with any questions or things I could have done differently. Check out other videos on my YouTube channel. Links to the websites mentioned earlier are listed in the description below. Best wishes to you. Now go create.